Hey, and welcome back to Real Talk Cinema. This is your go to space for deep movie breakdowns, emotional journeys, and the powerful truths behind the screen. Today, we're talking about a film that's raw, real, and incredibly important Surviving Lunch. A drama that dives into bullying, grief, and the courage to speak up when no one else will. It's not your average teen movie, it's a message, a movement, and a reminder that silence can be just as dangerous as cruelty. Let's get into it. Lena's life in New York City. Before the storm of tragedy and change, there was light, and in that light was Lena, a spirited teenager living in the heart of New York City. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was full of noise, color, rhythm, and most of all, love. She shared a modest but warm apartment with her mother and father, nestled among the towering buildings and constant hum of life outside. The city was more than just a backdrop, it was a character in her life. The subway rides filled with music and strangers, the street vendors calling out in the morning, the buzzing sidewalks where every face had a story. Lena loved it all. The chaos energized her. The diversity gave her a sense of belonging. But what truly made Lena's world whole was her father. A gentle, intelligent man with a quiet strength and a sense of humor that could soften even the hardest days. He was her safe space, her biggest supporter, the one who listened when she rambled about her day, who made her laugh when school got hard, and who taught her to stand up for what was right, no matter the cost. They had their ritual Saturday morning walks through Central Park with coffee and bagels, late night talks on the fire escape about life, dreams, and justice. He would often remind her, Lena, this world doesn't need more people who fit in. It needs more people who care. He saw in Lena a fire, a sense of empathy far beyond her years, and she, in turn, saw in him not just a parent, but a compass, pointing her toward kindness, strength, and truth. Those moments full of warmth, laughter, and feeling truly seen would become the foundation Lena would hold on to when everything else was torn away. Then, without warning, everything changed. It was an ordinary night, the kind of night that comes and goes without ceremony. Lena's father had stepped out. Just a quick errand, just a few minutes. But those few minutes would become the fracture line between the life she knew and the one she'd be forced to survive. The news came like a punch to the soul. A random act of violence, a senseless, cold decision made by a stranger, in a flash, that would erase a life, and with it, the beating heart of Lena's world. Her father was murdered. No warning, no goodbye. The world didn't stop for her grief. The city kept moving, loud and uncaring. Sirens still howled, crowds still rushed, but inside that tiny apartment, everything fell silent. Lena couldn't make sense of it. The man who had taught her how to be brave, how to speak up, how to love was gone. Just gone. Not from old age, not from illness, but from violence. The kind of violence that rips a hole through a family and leaves behind only echoes. Her mother, once steady and strong, now moved like a ghost. Bills piled up, smiles faded, and the apartment that used to be filled with warmth and memories now held only reminders, his jacket still hanging by the door, his favorite mug untouched in the sink, his voice still lingering in Lena's dreams. And so, with the weight of unbearable grief pressing down on them, Lena and her mother made the difficult decision. They had to leave. New York, the city that once felt like home, now felt like a haunted house. They packed their lives into boxes, left behind the streets that had shaped Lena's childhood, and set off to Florida, to a small town they didn't know, full of people they'd never met, hoping to outrun a pain that couldn't be outrun. But grief, like shadow, travels with you. Florida was nothing like New York. Gone were the soaring skyscrapers, the constant buzz of traffic, and the comforting anonymity of the crowds. In their place were flat roads, quiet neighborhoods, and smiles that didn't quite reach the eyes. Everything felt slower, simpler, but also smaller, like the world had shrunk around Lena. She and her mother arrived with heavy hearts and even heavier bags, not just filled with clothes and belongings, but with grief, memories, and the quiet weight of everything they had lost. They settled into a modest house on the edge of a small conservative town, where people spoke softly, waved politely, and kept their real thoughts behind drawn curtains. For Lena, it felt like stepping onto another planet. At school, she was the outsider before she even spoke. Her city accent, her bold clothes, her guarded eyes all marked her as different. In a place where everyone knew everyone, Lena was the girl with the tragic past and the invisible wall around her. Her new classmates whispered when she walked by, her teachers tiptoed around her, and the lunchroom, once a place of buzzing energy back in New York, now felt like a battlefield of clicks, stares, and silence. Even her mother, trying her best to hold it together, seemed smaller here, more tired, more alone. But Lena wasn't just grieving, she was watching. She noticed things others didn't want to see, the way certain kids were left out, the cruel jokes passed off as just teasing, the way authority figures looked the other way when bullying happened, and something inside her began to stir. This town had its own darkness, one that didn't come with flashing lights or sirens, but with quiet cruelty and hidden pain. Lena didn't come to Florida to make waves, but she was never taught to stay silent either. And even though she was still healing, still searching for her place in this new world, a seed had already been planted, the seed of resistance. A fresh start doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it means the beginning of a fight you never expected to have. The morning air was thick with humidity, as if even the weather wanted to press in on her. Lena stood outside the gates of her new high school backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes scanning the unfamiliar building like it was a fortress she wasn't sure she could breach. It wasn't just the first day of school. It was the first day of her new life, the one that had been forced on her. The one without her father. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked in. Inside, the halls were already buzzing, lockers slamming, sneakers squeaking on the floor, voices rising in a blend of gossip and laughter. It was all too loud, but somehow lonely. She moved through the corridors like a shadow, not invisible, but noticed for all the wrong reasons. Her dark jeans, her sharp eyeliner, the quiet pain in her posture, it all made her stand out in a place where blending in was survival. Eyes followed her, some curious, some judgmental, some just cold. No one spoke to her. Not at first. The few polite nods from teachers felt like obligation. The students sized her up with silent glances, whispering behind hands, labeling her before she even said a word. To them, she was the girl from New York, the new kid, maybe even the one with the dead dad, the kind of cruel detail that spreads faster than truth in small towns. She sat alone in class, her mind drifting between grief and defense, trying to focus on the teacher's words while her fingers dug nervously into her notebook. But it was the lunchroom where it all hit hardest. The moment she stepped in, Lena could feel it. The unspoken social map tables divided like territories, invisible lines drawn between popularity, power, and pain. She scanned the room for a place to sit, but every table was already full, not of people, but of walls. She ended up at a small corner table, alone. She ate quietly, barely tasting her food, and watched. What she saw disturbed her. A boy getting mocked 2 tables over. A girl with a tray shoved off her hands. Laughter erupting from a group of students pointing at someone trying not to cry, and teachers walking by without even noticing. Lena didn't know their names yet, but she recognized what was happening. Bullying, exclusion, silence. And somewhere deep inside, a familiar fire started to burn, the same fire her father always saw in her. She had only just arrived, but already Lena knew. This school wasn't just a place to learn. It was a place where people either conformed, suffered, or found the strength to fight back. She wasn't sure which one she would be yet. But this was only day 1. Lunchtime. In most schools, it's just a break, a chance to eat, chat, recharge. But here, in this Florida high school, the lunchroom was something else entirely. It was the stage, and Lena sat in the audience, quietly watching the performance unfold. She sat at her usual corner table, tray barely touched, back slightly hunched, headphones in with no music playing, just a buffer from the noise. Her eyes scanned the room, trained by the streets of New York to notice things others missed. What she saw made her stomach twist more than the lukewarm cafeteria food ever could. Over by the center tables, where the loudest voices lived, sat the self-appointed royalty, the popular kids. Football players in varsity jackets, girls with perfect hair and loud laughs that didn't reach their eyes. They were the untouchables, the ones who walked through the school like it was theirs to rule. Then came the watcher students who sat a few tables over, laughing along at the right moments, eager to be included, desperate not to become the next target. They didn't bully directly, but they didn't stop it either, silent allies to the throne. And then there were the outcasts. The kid with mismatched clothes and a nervous twitch, the girl who sat alone, always reading, the boy with a stutter who kept his head down, pretending not to hear the mockery thrown his way like food scraps to a dog. Lena's heart ached every time she saw someone flinch from a passing insult or get bumped accidentally by someone towering over them. It wasn't just cruelty, it was routine. The way one student's tray was knocked over, how the others laughed like it was tradition, how a teacher walked by, eyes darting toward the commotion, then away choosing not to see. It was all choreographed, a dance of dominance, silence, and pain. And what hit Lena hardest wasn't just what they were doing, it was how normal it all seemed. Back in New York, the city had noise and danger, yes, but it also had diversity, energy, resistance. Here, everything felt contained, controlled, hidden under layers of southern politeness and kids will be kids excuses. Lena didn't speak, not yet. But inside her, something shifted. She couldn't ignore this. She wouldn't look away. Because she'd seen what silence did to people. She'd seen what happens when no one stands up. And she had a feeling in this school, lunch wasn't just a break. It was a battlefield. In the crowded chaos of the lunchroom battlefield, Lena's eyes found something unexpected. A small group huddled together at a worn-out table in the far corner, away from the eyes of the popular crowd. They weren't flashy or loud. In fact, they were almost invisible to most. These were the outcasts. Each one carried a quiet weight, marked by stories Lena could feel but didn't yet know. There was Maya, who wore oversized hoodies that hid the bruises she never talked about. Carlos, who was often laughed at for his accent, but held his head high despite the whispers. And Elena, the girl with a sketchbook always tucked under her arm, who rarely spoke but whose eyes burned with fierce intelligence. Lena saw herself reflected in them, not in their faces, but in the shared experience of being targeted, excluded, and silenced. One day, as Lena tentatively approached, Carlos gave a small nod of recognition, a silent invitation. She sat down, heart pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. No words were needed at first. They understood. The lunchroom wasn't just a place to eat, it was where battles were fought without weapons, where strength was measured in survival. They shared stories in whispers, tales of cruel jokes, stolen lunches, whispered rumors, and moments when the weight of loneliness almost crushed them. But more than that, Lena found something she hadn't realized she was missing: solidarity. In this little corner, they weren't just victims, they were a quiet rebellion, a group bound by pain but fueled by resilience. Lena's presence was like a spark. For the first time in a long time, she felt seen, not as the new girl or the girl with the dead dad, but as one of them. Someone willing to stand, even if only in small ways, against the cruelty. Together, they weren't invisible anymore. Together, maybe, they could start to change things. Lena wasn't meant to blend in. Her style was bold ripped jeans, chunky boots, dark eyeliner that framed eyes still bruised from sorrow but burning with defiance. She carried the energy of New York City like a second skin, loud, unapologetic, impossible to ignore. And that was exactly what made her a target. From the moment she spoke up in class, challenging the easy answers and questioning the small-town ways, whispers began to follow her like a shadow. Teachers exchanged uneasy glances, Students rolled their eyes or shot cold stares. Lena's refusal to conform wasn't just about fashion or attitude. It was about voice, the voice her father had nurtured in her, the voice that refused to be silenced by grief or fear. When she laughed, it was too loud. When she walked down the halls, it was with too much confidence. When she stood with her new friends, it was a challenge to the unspoken rules that kept people like her in the margins. The popular crowd took notice and they didn't like what they saw. Snide remarks became pointed insults, jokes aimed to wound, text messages full of cruel rumors, and behind her back, a chorus of weirdo, drama queen, and worse. Teachers sometimes looked away, afraid to get involved. The administration preferred quiet compliance over conflict. But Lena's fire wasn't just a threat to them, it was a beacon for the outcasts she'd connected with, a reminder that standing out wasn't just a choice, it was a statement. She wasn't going to disappear into the background, no matter how much the town tried to dim her light. And in standing out, Lena found her purpose not just to survive, but to fight. The moment came faster than Lena expected. She was sitting in the hallway between classes when she noticed a boy, small, quiet, cornered by a group of popular students. Their voices were low but sharp, full of mockery and menace. The boy's shoulders hunched, eyes darting for an escape that didn't come. Something inside Lena snapped. She stood up, heart pounding, breath steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. She stepped forward and spoke clearly, her voice cutting through the tension. "Hey, leave him alone." The hallway fell silent. The bullies turned, surprised and angry that someone dared to challenge them. One of the popular kids, a tall football player with a sneer, stepped closer, voice dripping with menace. "Or what? You'll make us." Lena didn't back down. She looked each of them in the eye. "No, but I'm not going to watch you treat someone like that. It stops here." The words hung in the air like a challenge. The group glared, then laughed cruel, mocking laughter, but Lena saw the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes. The others shuffled away, leaving the boy standing, trembling but safe for the moment. But Lena knew the fight had just begun. Word spread quickly. The popular crowd saw her as a threat, a rebel refusing to play by their rules. The whispers became louder, the looks colder. But for Lena, standing up in that moment wasn't just about the boy. It was about her father's voice inside her, the lessons about courage and justice that she refused to forget. She was done being invisible, done being silent. And if that made her a target, so be it. In the midst of growing tension and whispered threats, there was one place where Lena found a sliver of light. A quiet sanctuary in the shape of a teacher who saw more than just a troubled new student. Mrs. Reynolds wasn't like the others. She noticed Lena, not just her defiance, but the pain beneath it. The way Lena's eyes flickered with grief in moments when she thought no one was watching. The way she refused to fold under pressure, even when it would have been easier to stay silent. One afternoon, after class, Mrs. Reynolds gently approached Lena's desk. "I see you," she said softly. "And I know it's not easy, but you're not alone." It was the first time Lena heard those words and truly felt them. Not pity, not judgment, just genuine understanding. Mrs. Reynolds didn't make grand speeches or promises she couldn't keep. Instead, she offered small acts of kindness, an encouraging nod in the hallway, extra time when assignments felt overwhelming, a listening ear when Lena chose to share her story in bits and pieces. Her support wasn't flashy, but it was steady like a lighthouse in the storm. For Lena, it was a reminder that even in a place full of judgment and cruelty, there were still people willing to stand quietly by her side. Sometimes, courage isn't just about fighting back loudly. Sometimes, it's about knowing someone believes in you when you don't believe in yourself. Taught in the quiet moments, when the noise of the school faded and the world seemed too heavy, Lena's mind would drift back to her father. She could see him clearly, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentle strength in his hands as he fixed things around their apartment, the warmth in his voice when he told her stories about standing up for what's right, even when it was hard. She remembered sitting on his lap as a little girl, feeling safe no matter what storms raged outside. And later, as a teenager, the serious talks on the fire escape, where he taught her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. His words echoed in her mind now more than ever. Lena, the world needs more people who care enough to speak out. Silence only lets the bad things grow. Those memories were bittersweet, a sharp ache in her chest, but also a source of strength. When the whispers and the stares in school felt overwhelming, she would close her eyes and see his face. She could almost hear his voice, steady and calm, telling her to hold on, to keep fighting. Her father's kindness wasn't just a memory, it was a legacy, a light she carried in the darkest moments. And with that light, Lena found the courage to step forward again, to speak up, to stand tall, and to believe that even one voice could make a difference. Every time Lena raised her voice against cruelty, every time she stood up for someone, the invisible walls around her grew higher and thicker. What started as whispered warnings soon turned into open coldness. Classmates who once glanced her way now turned away. Friends she thought she might make quietly drifted into safer circles, leaving her standing alone in the hallways. The cafeteria, already a battlefield, became a place of loneliness. Her corner table now farther from the buzz of chatter and laughter, her presence met with silence or sidelong glances. Even the outcasts she'd connected with began to feel the strain. Fear whispered in their eyes, "Are you ready to be completely alone?" The rumors multiplied, twisting her words, painting her as a troublemaker, a rebel without cause. Teachers who once showed quiet support started keeping their distance, wary of the escalating tension. Lena felt a sharp sting of isolation, not just from others, but from the world she was trying so hard to be a part of. Yet beneath the weight of loneliness, a stubborn ember burned. Isolation wasn't defeat, it was the price of courage. And Lena was learning slowly but surely that standing for what's right often meant standing alone, at least at first. The cruelty didn't stop at school doors, it followed Lena home, invading the one place she thought could be safe. At first, it was small things. A sneering comment on a photo, a private message filled with sarcasm and insults. Then, the attacks grew louder, more vicious. Anonymous accounts sent hateful messages in the dead of night, mocking her style, her voice, even her family's tragedy. Social media became a new battlefield, one where the hits came fast and relentless, where there was no escape and no safe corner to hide. Screens that once connected Lena to the world now felt like traps, glowing portals for relentless harassment. Her phone buzzed constantly with notifications, taunts disguised as jokes, cruel memes meant to isolate and humiliate. Even friends began to pull away, scared of being targeted themselves. The digital assault chipped away at her confidence, sometimes making her wonder if the fight was worth it. But each time, a voice inside reminded her of her father's lessons that silence only feeds the darkness. Lena tightened her grip on her courage and refused to let the virtual attacks silence her truth. Because standing up wasn't just about the school halls anymore. It was about reclaiming her space in every part of her life, real or digital. At home, behind closed doors and away from prying eyes, Lena's mother carried a heavy burden, a weight of worry that grew heavier with every passing day. She watched her daughter move through the motions of life like a ghost. The bright spark Lena once had now dimmed by the constant storms she faced at school and online. The laughter that used to fill their small Florida house was replaced by long silences and quiet tears swallowed in private. Her mother's heart ached with helplessness. She wanted to shield Lena from the world's cruelty, to take away the pain that came from relentless bullying and isolation. But no matter how tightly she held her daughter, no matter how many soothing words she whispered late at night, the invisible wounds ran deep. She saw the way Lena's eyes sometimes glazed over, as if retreating into a place where the hurt couldn't reach her. She noticed the growing walls Lena put up, the curt answers, the slammed doors, the sudden withdrawal from family dinners and phone calls. Her mother worried endlessly, staying awake into the early hours, wondering if she was doing enough. Was she too strict? Too lenient? Was there something she missed, a sign she didn't catch? Each day was a battle between wanting to protect Lena and knowing that her daughter had to find her own way through the darkness. Tears would sometimes escape in the quiet, not out of weakness, but out of love, love so fierce it frightened her. She prayed for strength, for hope, for a way to help Lena reclaim the joy and courage that once defined her. Because no mother wants to watch her child suffer alone. And no matter what storms lay ahead, she vowed to be the steady harbor where Lena could always find refuge. After weeks of watching the relentless cruelty unfold, the whispered insults, the exclusion, the cold stares, Lena and her small group of friends reached a turning point. They were tired of being silenced, tired of feeling powerless in a system that seemed determined to look the other way. One evening, gathered in Lena's modest bedroom, the air thick with nervous energy, they began to plan. The idea was simple but daring: a lunchroom sit-in, a peaceful protest right in the heart of the school's battlefield, where everyone could see that bullying wasn't just harmless teasing, it was a serious problem that demanded attention. They talked in hushed voices, hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. What if the popular kids tried to break it up? What if the teachers punished them? What if it made things worse? But beneath the doubts was a fierce determination. They had nothing left to lose except their silence. Lena took the lead, her New York fire lighting up the room as she mapped out the plan. Spread the word quietly, create signs with powerful messages, invite as many students as possible, especially those who had suffered in silence. It wasn't just a protest. It was a call for change, a demand for respect, safety, and dignity in a place that had so far offered none. As they spoke, Lena felt something she hadn't felt in a long time, a surge of purpose, a sense of community, a flicker of hope. This wasn't just about surviving lunch anymore. It was about taking a stand. And together, they would make sure their voices could no longer be ignored. The morning after their plans for the lunchroom sit-in began to spread, Lena and her group felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They believed in their cause, in the power of their voices, but they also knew they were stepping into uncharted territory. What they didn't expect was the cold, calculated pushback from the very people who were supposed to protect them. When Lena and her friends approached the school administrators to explain their protest, hoping for support or at least understanding, they were met with furrowed brows and carefully measured words. The principal's voice was calm but firm, each sentence a thinly veiled warning. "We understand your concerns, but this isn't the way to handle things. This kind of protest could disrupt the school environment. We don't want to create unnecessary controversy. Perhaps you should focus on more constructive ways to address your issues." The message was clear: silence was safer, compliance was expected, and standing up was discouraged. Lena felt a sinking weight settle in her chest. Here they were, trying to shine a light on a problem that had been ignored for too long, and the adults, the ones who should be their allies, were shutting them down. But in that resistance, Lena also saw something important: fear. Fear of change, fear of discomfort, fear of admitting that the school's walls weren't as safe as they claimed. The defiance inside her only grew stronger. If the adults wouldn't stand with them, Lena and her friends would stand even taller. Because sometimes the hardest battles are the ones worth fighting the most. The day of the sit-in dawned heavy with tension. Lena felt the weight of every doubtful glance and whispered warning pressing down on her like a storm about to break. Her hands trembled slightly as she carried the homemade signs, bold letters demanding respect and kindness, each one a small beacon of hope amid the dark sea of indifference. The backlash had started even before the protest. Rumors spread like wildfire. "They're troublemakers. They want attention. It's going to cause chaos." Some friends wavered, their courage faltering under the pressure to stay safe, to blend in, to avoid becoming the next target. But Lena's heart was steeled by something deeper than fear: the memory of her father's strength, the faces of her friends who had suffered in silence, and her own fierce refusal to be broken. As she and her group took their places in the bustling lunchroom, the chatter dimmed, replaced by shocked gasps and curious stares. Standing there, shoulder to shoulder with her friends, Lena felt a surge of power ripple through her veins, a wild, raw courage that no bullying, no threat, no isolation could extinguish. This was more than a protest. It was a declaration, a promise to herself and everyone who had been hurt, ignored, or silenced. Lena wasn't just surviving lunch anymore. She was changing it, Dot. The day of the sit-in arrived like a quiet storm. As the lunch bell rang, the cafeteria buzzed with its usual noise, chatter, laughter, the clatter of trays and chairs. But amid the chaos, something was different. Something was about to change. Lena and her friends walked in together, their steps steady but hearts racing. They carried handmade signs, simple but powerful messages scrawled in bold letters. Stop bullying now. Respect isn't optional. We deserve to be heard. They moved to the center of the cafeteria and sat down, side by side, their bodies calm but their presence loud. No words were spoken, no angry shouts, no chaos, just silence. Their eyes met those of classmates, some confused, some curious, others scornful. The popular kids exchanged uneasy glances, unsure how to react. Teachers stopped mid-step, caught off guard by this unexpected display. Lena felt a strange mix of vulnerability and strength wash over her. For the first time, she wasn't hiding. She wasn't shrinking into the background. She was visible, a beacon of resistance. The room seemed to hold its breath. Around them, the usual lunchroom rhythms faltered. Conversations hushed. Trays paused halfway to mouths. Phones were lowered, eyes fixed on the quiet defiance unfolding before them. It wasn't just a protest, it was a message. Bullying was not invisible, it was not acceptable, and those who suffered in silence were done waiting. Lena's heart swelled with hope. This moment, small and silent as it was, felt like the first crack in a wall that had held too much pain for too long. And she knew change had begun. The sit-in sent ripples through the school, and reactions poured in like a tide, some harsh, some hopeful, all undeniable. At first, the popular crowd met the silent protest with mockery. They whispered cruel jokes in the halls, posting memes and snide comments on social media, trying to belittle Lena and her friends as troublemakers or attention seekers. The cafeteria tables buzzed with sarcastic remarks, and some students openly rolled their eyes or turned their backs, refusing to acknowledge the protest. But beneath the surface, something else was stirring. Whispers of curiosity spread among quieter students, those who had suffered quietly or watched from the sidelines. They began to look differently at Lena and her group, no longer as outcasts, but as brave voices daring to break the silence. In classrooms, conversations shifted. Teachers found themselves addressing bullying more openly, encouraged by the courage shown during the sit-in. Parents heard about it at home, sparking discussions that had long been avoided. Even some students who once joined in the bullying started to question their actions, confronted by the undeniable message that this was real, and it hurt. For Lena, this mixed reaction was both a challenge and a victory. The ridicule stung, but the growing awareness was a spark of hope. The silent protest had cracked open a door, and now more eyes were opening. Change, she realized, was never easy. It came wrapped in struggle, resistance, and the messy courage to keep going despite it all. And the story was just beginning. What started as a quiet, determined act inside the school cafeteria soon exploded beyond the walls of the small Florida town, without Lena or her friends even realizing it at first. Somewhere in the crowd, a student had recorded the sit-in on their phone. The video captured the stillness, the courage, the raw honesty of Lena and her friends sitting in silence, holding their signs like shields against the cruelty that had shadowed their days. Within hours, the video was uploaded online, shared across social media platforms, and quickly began to gain traction. At first, it was the local community, students, parents, teachers, watching and sharing, many moved by the simple power of the protest. Then the attention spread farther. News outlets picked it up. Online forums buzzed with conversations about bullying, courage, and the need for change in schools everywhere. Suddenly, Lena's quiet stand was no longer just a school event. It became a symbol, a rallying cry for students facing similar struggles in towns and cities across the country. The viral video brought both support and new challenges. Messages of encouragement flooded in, from strangers inspired by her bravery to experts offering resources and advice. Yet the increased visibility also intensified backlash from some who didn't want to see the spotlight on the school's problems. For Lena, the viral moment was overwhelming but also empowering. Her voice, once drowned out by whispers and cruelty, was now amplified for the world to hear. She realized that sometimes a single act of courage could ignite a movement, and that even the smallest protest could ripple into something far greater than anyone imagined. The viral video of the sit-in had catapulted Lena and her cause into the public eye, but with that spotlight came a whirlwind of mixed reactions that shook the small town to its core. Local news stations arrived with cameras and microphones, eager to capture the story that had captured so many hearts online. Headlines praised Lena's bravery and called for urgent action against bullying. Editorials sparked passionate debates about school culture, student safety, and the role of administrators. But not everyone welcomed the attention. In the community, lines were drawn sharply. Some parents and residents saw the protest as a necessary wake-up call, a courageous stand that exposed painful truths long ignored. They rallied behind Lena, attending school board meetings and demanding better policies and protections for students. Others bristled at what they called public shaming of the school and its staff. They defended the administration, arguing that the media exaggerated the issue and that the protest disrupted the school's order. Rumors swirled, dividing neighbors, friends, and even families. At school, the tension thickened. Supporters of Lena grew in number, but so did those resistant to change, creating a palpable rift among students and teachers alike. Lena found herself at the center of a storm she hadn't anticipated. Her fight no longer just personal, but a catalyst for community conflict. It was a complex, painful reminder that progress often comes with discomfort, and that true change requires facing not just external battles, but the difficult divides within our own communities. Through it all, Lena held on to her conviction. She knew that shining a light on the shadows was the first step toward healing, even if the journey was messy and uncertain. As Lena's protest gained attention and stirred the community, the backlash from the bullies became fiercer and more personal. What had once been whispered threats and sidelong glances escalated into open hostility, raw, loud, and terrifying. The lunchroom, once a place of silent suffering, turned into a battleground. Lena's every step was shadowed by jeers and sneers, her every word met with sneers or sneering silence. But the worst was yet to come. One afternoon, as Lena walked alone through a deserted hallway, the shadows seemed to close in around her. A group of students she recognized, those who had tormented her since her first day, stepped forward, their faces twisted with anger and menace. "You think you're some kind of hero?" one sneered. "You're just making this worse for all of us." Their words were sharp knives, but it was their presence that crushed the air around her, the way they cornered her, blocking the way out, eyes burning with hatred. Fear surged through Lena's veins, icy and paralyzing. But beneath that fear, a spark remained, the lessons her father had instilled, the strength she had found in her friends and the sit-in. With a trembling voice that was steadier than she felt, Lena met their glare. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about all of us, and I won't be scared into silence." The confrontation didn't end with fists or screams, though it could have. Instead, it ended with the bullies retreating, surprised by her courage and the unshakable resolve behind it. Still, the encounter left Lena shaken. She knew this was only the beginning of a harder fight, a fight that tested not just her bravery, but her very spirit. In those dark moments, she realized how fragile courage could be, and how vital it was to hold on to it, no matter what. The school board meeting room was packed. Rows of folding chairs filled with parents, teachers, administrators, and students, all buzzing with anticipation and tension. For Lena, standing at the podium felt like stepping onto a stage where every eye was a spotlight, every whisper a drumbeat of doubt. But she wasn't here to be silenced. Taking a deep breath, Lena began to speak. Her voice was steady, but filled with raw emotion, a blend of sorrow, courage, and unyielding hope. She spoke of her father, the man who had taught her about strength, kindness, and standing up for what's right. She told the room about the pain of losing him, the upheaval it caused, and how his memory fueled her determination to fight against cruelty in every form. Her words painted vivid pictures of the bullying she and others endured, the isolation in the lunchroom, the whispers behind backs, the invisible wounds that hurt just as much as any bruise. She described the sit-in not as an act of rebellion, but as a plea for understanding and change. As she spoke, the room fell silent. Faces softened, some eyes glistened with tears, others looked away, unable to meet her gaze. Lena's voice grew stronger with every sentence, a beacon piercing through the doubt and denial. When she finished, there was a moment of stillness, a breath held by the entire room, before applause broke out, hesitant at first, then growing louder. In that moment, Lena wasn't just a girl who had suffered. She was a leader, a voice for those who had none. She had found her strength, her purpose, and her voice, and she wasn't going to let it be ignored. Lena's words hung in the air long after the applause faded. The room, once buzzing with skepticism and tension, had shifted into a space of reflection and awakening. Students who had ignored or even joined in the bullying now looked at Lena and at each other with new eyes. The stories she shared weren't just hers, they echoed the hidden pain many carried silently. The invisible scars that classrooms and hallways often overlooked suddenly became impossible to deny. Teachers and administrators, too, felt the weight of her message. Behind their official roles, some wrestled with guilt, wondering if they had missed signs, turned a blind eye, or failed to protect. Others saw the urgent need for real change, beyond policies written on paper. Parents whispered quietly among themselves, confronted with the reality their children faced daily. The conversations spilled beyond the meeting room into homes, neighborhoods, and community spaces. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of emotions: regret, empathy, hope, and a growing resolve to act. Lena's speech had done more than speak truth. It had pierced the walls of silence and denial that had long surrounded bullying. It sparked the beginning of serious, heartfelt conversations, ones that no one could easily walk away from. For the first time, the community was facing the problem together, opening a path toward healing and transformation. And at the center of it all was Lena, the girl whose courage had finally broken through. In the days following Lena's powerful speech and the surge of community conversations, the school administration found itself at a crossroads. The pressure was undeniable. Parents demanded action, students called for safety, and the media spotlight refused to fade. Reluctantly at first, the administration began to shift from defensiveness to response. Meetings were held behind closed doors, policies dusted off and re-examined, and new plans cautiously drafted. Anti-bullying programs, once just words in the student handbook, started to take shape in reality. The school introduced workshops on empathy and inclusion, brought in counselors trained to handle bullying cases, and set up anonymous reporting systems to give students a safer way to speak out. Teachers were encouraged to be more proactive, learning to recognize subtle signs of bullying and intervene before situations escalated. Though some resistance lingered, both from staff set in old ways and from students wary of change, the momentum was undeniable. Lena watched the slow transformation with cautious hope. It wasn't perfect, and it certainly wasn't fast enough for many, but it was a start, a sign that voices like hers could lead to real change. For the first time in a long while, the school felt a little safer, a little more aware. And Lena knew that change, especially meaningful change, was never easy or instant. It was a process, fueled by persistence, courage, and the refusal to accept things as they were. What began as a small, quiet act of defiance slowly blossomed into something much bigger than Lena had ever imagined. Word spread through the halls, not just of the protest itself, but of the courage behind it. Students who had once felt invisible or powerless began to see Lena not as a lone fighter, but as a symbol of strength and hope. Gradually, the marginalized found their voices, stepping forward to join the movement. More friends, classmates, even some teachers started showing up, not just at protests, but in everyday acts of kindness and solidarity. Lunch tables, once divided by fear and exclusion, now shared stories, smiles, and support. Messages of encouragement appeared on lockers and social media. Quiet conversations about respect and empathy grew louder. The community that had once seemed fractured began to knit itself together, fueled by the belief that no one should suffer alone. For Lena, this growing support was both humbling and empowering. She realized that her fight was no longer just hers, it belonged to everyone who had ever been pushed aside, silenced, or hurt. And in that shared strength, she found not only hope for change, but also the beginning of healing for herself, her friends, and the entire school. As the movement grew stronger, something remarkable began to happen. The once loud and relentless voices of the bullies started to fade. The power they had wielded for so long, fueled by fear and intimidation, was slowly slipping through their fingers. The lunchroom that used to echo with their taunts grew quieter around Lena and her friends. The sneers and jeers lost their edge, replaced by hesitant glances and uneasy silence. The bullies found themselves increasingly isolated, confronted not with fear, but with solidarity and resolve. With teachers more vigilant and students more united, the bullies' tactics began to lose their grip. It wasn't a sudden silence, it was a gradual unraveling, a diminishing of their influence as the community refused to let cruelty be accepted or ignored. For Lena, seeing the bullies' silence was bittersweet. The scars they left wouldn't disappear overnight, but the shift gave her a glimpse of hope. That change was real, that courage could chip away even at the hardest walls. And in that quiet, a new chapter was beginning, a chapter where kindness, respect, and courage had the final word. Amid the whirlwind of protests, speeches, and growing change, Lena knew there was something deeply personal she needed to do. A way to honor not just the fight she was leading, but the man who had inspired it all, her father. With quiet determination, she began organizing a small memorial at the school. It wasn't meant to be a grand event, but a space where students, teachers, and friends could come together to remember a man who had shaped her strength and kindness. On a crisp afternoon, beneath the shade of a large oak tree near the school's courtyard, a simple gathering took shape. Photos of her father stood alongside candles and handwritten notes from classmates who had been touched by Lena's journey and his memory. Lena spoke softly but with conviction, sharing stories of her father's warmth, courage, and unwavering belief in standing up for what's right. She spoke of his love for the city they had left behind, the lessons he had passed on, and how his spirit lived on in every act of kindness she and her friends showed. The memorial became more than a tribute. It was a symbol of legacy, resilience, and hope. It reminded everyone present that the fight against bullying was rooted in love, in the memory of those who taught us to be brave, and in the belief that we can create a better world. For Lena, the memorial was a moment of healing, a quiet pause amid the storm, a chance to carry forward her father's light in a new way. And as the candles flickered in the gentle breeze, it was clear his spirit was alive, guiding her every step. After months of struggle, protests, and heartfelt conversations, a quiet transformation began to take hold within the walls of Lena's school, starting most noticeably in the lunchroom. Once a place marked by exclusion, whispers, and tension, the cafeteria slowly shifted into a space where kindness and respect started to bloom. Students who had felt invisible found new friends. Those who had been targets of cruelty began to feel safe enough to be themselves. Lena noticed small but powerful changes. Groups that rarely mingled sharing tables, laughs replacing sneers, hands reaching out instead of fists raised. Teachers walked through the lunchroom with more purpose, engaging with students, reinforcing empathy and understanding. The posters and signs from protests gradually gave way to murals and messages celebrating diversity, courage, and community. Though challenges remained, the atmosphere felt lighter, more hopeful, proof that even the hardest battles could lead to a safer, more inclusive place. For Lena, this was the reward, the tangible sign that courage and persistence could break down walls of fear and build bridges of trust. The school wasn't perfect, but it was healing. And in that healing, a brighter, kinder future was being born. Dot. After the storm of conflict, protest, and change, Lena found herself standing at a quieter place, a space where healing could finally begin. The pain of loss, the sting of bullying, and the weight of responsibility had once felt like an unbearable burden. But now, as days turned into weeks, she began to feel a subtle shift within herself. Each small victory, the growing support, the changes in school, the memorial for her father, wove together into a tapestry of hope and strength. Lena realized that while the scars of her journey wouldn't vanish overnight, she had already transformed. She had taken her grief and pain and shaped them into courage, into action, into change. In moments of stillness, she felt her father's presence, not as a shadow of sorrow, but as a light guiding her forward. She smiled more freely, laughed with friends, and allowed herself to dream again. Most importantly, Lena found peace in knowing that her voice had mattered, that she had made a difference not just for herself, but for countless others. Her healing was not the end of her story, but a powerful beginning, a reminder that even in the darkest times, the human spirit could rise, heal, and soar. As the screen fades toward its closing scenes, a quiet but profound truth lingers, one that echoes long after the story ends. The film reminds us that a single voice, when raised with courage and conviction, can ripple through walls of fear, misunderstanding, and indifference. It can awaken hearts, shift minds, and ignite movements that change lives. But it also warns of the dangerous cost of silence, the unseen pain, the hidden scars, and the wounds that grow deeper when cruelty goes unchallenged. Lena's journey is a testament to the power of speaking out, standing firm, and refusing to accept injustice. Her story invites us all to listen, to act, and to remember. Silence can be deadly, but one voice can be the spark that lights the way. The film closes not just with an ending, but with a call to courage, compassion, and change. Because in the fight against bullying, every voice matters, every act of kindness counts. And together, those voices can build a future where no one is left unheard or alone. In the midst of turmoil and struggle, when the weight of the world seemed to press down on Lena's shoulders, a quiet but profound connection began to grow, a friendship that would become her anchor in the storm. Among the small group of outcasts she had found herself drawn to, there was one person who stood out, not just as a fellow struggler, but as a kindred spirit who understood the complexities of pain and resilience. Their bond was forged not through grand gestures, but through countless small moments of empathy and shared vulnerability. It started with simple conversations, exchanging whispered stories about the bullying they had endured, the isolation they felt walking the crowded hallways, and the yearning for acceptance. They spoke honestly about their fears and hopes, realizing that beneath their different backgrounds, they were united by the same deep need to be seen, heard, and valued. Over time, that initial connection blossomed into something far more powerful, a sanctuary where Lena could let down her guard. In this friendship, she found a rare and precious gift, unwavering support without judgment, a safe space where her anger, sadness, and doubts were met with compassion and understanding. Together, they shared moments of laughter that felt like sunlight breaking through gray clouds, Tears that washed away the heaviness of loneliness, and quiet silences that spoke volumes of mutual respect. They became each other's sounding boards and shields, offering encouragement on days when courage felt scarce. This friendship became a lifeline, reminding Lena that strength wasn't just about standing tall alone, it was about leaning on others, finding solidarity in shared experience, and knowing that even when the world seemed hostile, she was not alone. Beyond the protests and speeches, beyond the public fight for change, this bond provided a steady foundation of hope. It gave Lena the emotional resilience to keep moving forward, to face each new challenge with a heart fortified by genuine connection. In the delicate intertwining of their lives, Lena discovered one of the most profound truths of her journey. That true friendship can be a light in the darkest times, a quiet rebellion against isolation, and a source of healing that no protest alone can provide. Dot. The fluorescent lights of the school conference room cast a sterile glow over the gathered group. Teachers, parents, and a few administrators clustered around long tables. The air buzzed with a mix of anticipation, frustration, and cautious hope. For Lena's mother, this meeting was more than just a formality. It was a pivotal moment to fight for her daughter and every student who had ever felt invisible in the shadow of bullying. With quiet determination, Lena's mom stood among the parents, her eyes scanning the room filled with concerned faces. She wasn't just a mother speaking for her child. She was a voice for change, armed with the raw stories Lena had shared and the painful truths that couldn't be ignored. She spoke passionately about the emotional toll bullying had taken on Lena, describing the sleepless nights, the tears, and the weight of carrying such pain in silence. Her words painted a vivid picture of a girl transformed from confident and vibrant into someone wary and withdrawn, longing for a safe place to simply be herself. Her voice grew stronger as she urged the teachers and administrators to do more than just enforce rules, to foster an environment where empathy, respect, and kindness weren't optional, but foundational. She advocated for comprehensive anti-bullying programs, better training for staff to recognize and address bullying early, and a commitment to creating safe spaces where students could speak openly, without fear. Other parents began to nod, some sharing their own stories of children struggling with similar challenges. Teachers expressed a willingness to listen, but also a frustration with systemic limitations. The conversation became a delicate dance, honest, sometimes tense, but ultimately driven by a shared desire to protect and nurture the children entrusted to their care. For Lena's mother, this meeting was exhausting yet empowering. It was a reminder that change required more than bravery from students. It demanded the collective will of families, educators, and communities. As the meeting drew to a close, there was no immediate solution, no sweeping victory, but seeds had been planted, seeds of understanding, urgency, and collaboration. Walking out of the school that evening, Lena's mom felt a cautious hope. The journey ahead was long, but now they were not fighting alone. In the swirling currents of high school politics, where popularity often shields cruelty, Lena found an unlikely source of strength, a quiet ally whose support came as a surprising balm to her weary spirit. This ally was one of the most popular students in school, the kind who usually walked the halls with effortless confidence, surrounded by friends and unquestioned social power. No one expected this person to notice, let alone support, the outcasts who challenged the status quo. But beneath the polished exterior and the laughs shared in the cafeteria, this popular student had quietly been watching Lena's courage from afar. They saw beyond the labels, beyond the lunchroom divisions, recognizing the bravery it took to stand alone against a tide of cruelty. Instead of joining the jeers or turning a blind eye, this student began to act, subtly but significantly. In hallways where whispers of bullying thrived, they would step in with a firm word or a protective presence. When friends made cruel jokes, they challenged them quietly but firmly, planting seeds of doubt about the easy cruelty. Their support wasn't loud or public at first. It was a series of small, almost invisible acts. A text of encouragement sent in secret, A shield raised when bullying flared, a refusal to join the laughter at Lena's expense. For Lena, discovering this unexpected ally was both shocking and deeply moving. It was proof that courage can be found in unexpected places, that the fight for kindness and justice transcended social boundaries. This quiet support began to shift the dynamics in subtle but powerful ways. It encouraged others to reconsider their own actions, to question the unspoken rules of exclusion and cruelty. The popular student's silent rebellion became a beacon, a reminder that standing up for what's right doesn't always need a crowd. Sometimes just a single, steadfast voice is enough to start turning the tide. In the quiet moments between protests, speeches, and the whirlwind of change, Lena found herself confronting a deeper, more intimate challenge: the delicate balance between grief and hope. The loss of her father had left a raw wound, one that throbbed beneath her courage and determination. Some days the pain felt overwhelming, a heavy fog that dulled even her brightest moments. Other days, hope flickered like a fragile flame, fragile but persistent. Lena came to understand that healing wasn't a straight path. It wasn't about forgetting or moving on too quickly. It was about learning to carry her grief alongside her dreams. She allowed herself to feel the sadness without shame, to remember her father not just in sorrow, but in the strength he had given her. His kindness, his courage, and his unwavering belief in standing up for what's right became the foundation upon which she rebuilt herself. Gradually, Lena discovered new parts of herself: resilience she hadn't known she possessed, compassion deepened by pain, and a quiet confidence rooted not in perfection, but in authenticity. She learned that growth meant patience, that healing was a journey made of small steps, setbacks, and breakthroughs. Some days she stumbled, others she soared, but with every breath she moved closer to peace. Through this process, Lena's fight for change became more than just a cause. It became a reflection of her own transformation. And in embracing both her grief and her hope, she found a powerful truth: that the human spirit is capable of rising, even after the deepest falls. Months after the protests, speeches, and heartfelt conversations, a new chapter began to write itself within the school's walls. A chapter marked not by conflict, but by compassion. Inspired by Lena's bravery and the movement she helped ignite, the school decided to create something lasting: an annual Day of Kindness. This special day wasn't just a calendar event, it became a powerful tradition, a dedicated time to celebrate empathy, inclusion, and respect. On the Day of Kindness, students, teachers, and staff came together in a shared commitment to create a welcoming space for everyone. The cafeteria buzzed with laughter instead of whispers, groups reached across old divides, and new friendships blossomed. Classrooms held discussions about empathy, storytelling sessions where students shared personal experiences, and workshops on standing up against bullying. Posters adorned the halls, not with warnings or rules, but with messages of encouragement and hope. Acts of kindness, big and small, were celebrated, reminding everyone that change wasn't just an event, but a daily choice. For Lena, seeing the school embrace this tradition was a moment of profound pride and joy. It was proof that her voice, along with the voices of her friends and allies, had planted seeds that would continue to grow long after the cameras stopped rolling. The Day of Kindness became a living legacy, an enduring reminder that every person has the power to make a difference, that empathy can break down walls, and that kindness can change a community, one day at a time. Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you like this video, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Drop a comment below and tell us what part of Lena's story hit you the most. We love chatting with you. Stay awesome, stay kind, and we'll catch you in the next one right here on Real Talk Cinema. Peace out.